Okay, let's go. Number 1. Derinkuyu, Underground City. You're renovating your basement in a small village in southern Turkey. It's 1963. The work is ordinary, widening a room, knocking through a wall. The wall gives way, and on the other side is not another room. It's a tunnel. You take a torch and follow it. The tunnel slopes downward. Then another tunnel branches off the first. Then another room. Then more tunnels. You keep going down. At some point you stop, standing in the dark, 280 feet below the house you were renovating, and you understand that you are nowhere near the bottom. The man who found Derinkuyu was never named in the official archaeological reports. That detail alone should tell you something about how this discovery was received. A resident of Nevşehir province, in the Cappadocia region of central Turkey, broke through a wall during routine home renovations and accidentally uncovered what would become the most significant underground discovery of the 20th century. Turkish archaeologists arrived and began excavating. What they found had been sitting below the village, completely unknown to the people living above it, for centuries. Nobody knew it was there. Nobody had looked. Derinkuyu is an underground city, not a tunnel system, not a bunker, a city. It descends 18 stories into volcanic tuff rock, reaching 280 feet below the surface. At its peak, it could shelter 20,000 people, along with their livestock, their food, their wine, and their water. There are kitchens, stables, communal rooms, a religious school, wine presses carved directly into the rock, and 52 ventilation shafts, some extending 180 feet deep, that supply fresh air to every level without fans, without pumps, driven purely by the physics of their spacing and depth. Every room, on every level, receives breathable air, even with 20,000 people and their animals living underground. On each level there are rolling stone doors. Each one is a circular disc weighing between 1,000 and 1,500 pounds, roughly the weight of a small car, designed to roll across the tunnel entrance and seal it completely. The doors have a hole at the center. Small, just wide enough for a spear, and the mechanism works in only one direction. The doors can only be closed from inside. Whatever they were keeping out, it couldn't close the doors behind it. Interconnecting tunnels link Derinkuyu to other underground cities in the region, some of them miles away. The network of underground settlements in Cappadocia numbers more than 200. Derinkuyu is the largest and deepest. One tunnel at the third level connects to Kaymakli, 5 miles away, through passages running entirely underground. Mainstream archaeologists attribute Derinkuyu to the Phrygians, an Iron Age people who inhabited the region in the 8th to 7th century BCE, with possible expansion by the Hittites before them. The explanation is practical: a refuge from invading armies. Early Christians later used the cities to hide from Roman persecution. The ventilation system, while impressive, was supposedly built through trial and error. Dig a shaft, see if it works, dig another if it doesn't. But this explanation requires us to believe several things that don't sit easily together. First, that a people without atmospheric modeling built a ventilation system perfectly supplying fresh air to 18 underground levels through 52 precisely spaced shafts by accident, through trial and error, over time. Second, that the rolling stone doors, which can only be closed from inside, were designed to protect against human raiders. Human raiders need to open the door in front of them, not close the door behind them. A door closable only from inside was designed to hold against something that, if it reached the door, could operate the mechanism itself. Third, where is the debris? Excavating 2.5 million cubic feet of rock, enough to fill roughly 90,000 dump truck loads from 18 levels of tunnels and rooms, produces an enormous volume of material. Nothing remains above ground. No hill, no dump site, no trace. And then there's the depth. 50 feet underground provides perfect protection from an invading army. They can't hear you, can't reach you, they'll eventually move on. So why 280 feet? Why 18 stories? What threat required an entire civilization to keep descending, to engineer an air supply sustaining them not for days but for months, to build stone doors designed to hold against something coming down after them? Nobody knows who carved the lowest levels. The oldest sections have not been definitively dated. The official estimate places initial construction in the Phrygian period, but the deepest rooms are stylistically different from the upper levels, and their age remains uncertain. The city has been studied for more than 60 years. 8 of its 18 stories are open to the public. 10 more remain, at various stages of exploration, in the dark beneath the village. What threat required 280 feet of rock overhead? How did a pre-industrial civilization engineer a ventilation system that functions perfectly across 18 underground levels? Where did 2.5 million cubic feet of excavated rock go? And what exactly were those rolling stone doors designed to keep out from inside? Number 2. The underworld chambers of Teotihuacan. When the robot's camera broke through into the sealed chamber, it transmitted an image that stopped the excavation team cold. Pools of liquid on the floor. Silver in the torchlight, not water, mercury. Teotihuacan is the largest ancient city in the Western Hemisphere. At its peak, around 400 CE, it housed more than 100,000 people and dominated Mesoamerica with a reach extending as far as modern-day Guatemala. The Pyramid of the Sun is one of the largest structures ever built by human hands. Its base covers an area nearly as large as the Great Pyramid of Giza. And directly beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, running 330 feet from the base of the pyramid to a set of chambers sealed since approximately 250 CE, there is a tunnel. Nobody had entered it for roughly 1,800 years. The tunnel was located in 2003 by archaeologist Sergio Gomez Chavez when heavy rainfall exposed a small sinkhole near the temple's base. Gomez Chavez recognized the sinkhole as a chamber entrance. The chamber connected to a tunnel. Excavation began. It would take a decade. The tunnel was packed from end to end, with material deliberately filled, deliberately sealed. Whatever was inside had been placed there with the explicit intention that it stay there. By 2013, the team had cleared enough tunnel to send in a remote-controlled robot named Tlaloc 2, equipped with a camera, lights, and ground-penetrating sensors. The robot moved 330 feet through total darkness and entered 3 chambers at the end, and there, on the floor of the chambers, were pools of liquid mercury. Liquid mercury. In a sealed underground chamber in Mexico, with no natural mercury deposits anywhere near Teotihuacan, mercury had to be transported hundreds of miles. The nearest significant deposits in Mesoamerica are in central Mexico, far from the site. Extracting liquid mercury from cinnabar ore, moving it across hundreds of miles of terrain, and placing it in specific pools on the floor of sealed underground chambers required deliberate effort on a significant scale. The excavation team also found approximately 75,000 individual ritual objects. Jade figurines, obsidian blades, jaguar remains, rubber balls, wooden objects, seeds plus material identified as the preserved skin of sacrificial victims. 75,000 objects, placed in the dark, and then sealed in. The 3 chambers are positioned in a configuration that some researchers interpret as a map of the underworld, as described in Mesoamerican cosmology, the realms through which the dead must travel. The mercury may have represented an underground river, a reflective mirror connecting the living world to the dead one. No burial was present. Whatever the chambers were built for, it wasn't to hold a body. Mainstream archaeologists interpret the tunnel as a ceremonial procession route, and the chambers as a ritual underworld, used for ceremonies reenacting the passage of a dead king's soul through the underworld realms. The mercury represented a divine river or cosmic mirror. The offerings accumulated over generations of ritual use before the tunnel was sealed, possibly during a period of political disruption around 250 CE. That's one explanation. But this interpretation, while plausible, leaves the most fundamental question completely unanswered. Who built Teotihuacan? Nobody knows. The city's builders left no deciphered writing system, no identifiable ethnic group, no name in any neighboring culture's records. The greatest city of the ancient Americas, with pyramids rivaling Egypt in mass, with a street grid aligned to celestial events, with a tunnel system containing liquid mercury transported hundreds of miles, was built by people whose identity is completely unknown to us. The Aztecs, who arrived in the region centuries after Teotihuacan was abandoned, named it the place where the gods were created. They didn't know who built it either. They assumed it had to be the gods. And in the absence of any other answer, that assumption has stood for 600 years. When the builders sealed the tunnel around 250 CE, they packed it with earth and debris and walked away. Whatever ceremonies had taken place at the end of 330 feet of total darkness, they chose to close that door permanently. The tunnel sat sealed for 1,750 years before a rainstorm opened a small hole in the ground and Gomez Chavez looked down into it. The mercury is still on the floor, still pooled exactly where it was placed nearly 1,800 years ago. Still silver in the dark, in a room that nobody opened, in a city built by people whose name we do not know. What was the mercury for? Why were 75,000 ritual objects necessary for a space with no burial? What happened around 250 CE that made the builders seal the tunnel permanently and never return? And who exactly were the people who built the largest city in the ancient Americas, the people whose name we still don't know? Number 3. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni. Say something in the oracle chamber and your voice doesn't echo. It surrounds you. It comes back from all directions simultaneously, at a frequency you feel in your chest before your ears register it. Researchers who have studied the chamber describe it as disorienting. Some visitors describe it as terrifying. The hypogeum of Hal Saflieni is 5,000 years old, and it was designed to do exactly that. The discovery was accidental. In 1902, construction workers on the island of Malta were building cisterns beneath a cluster of houses in the town of Paola. One of them broke through a limestone ceiling into darkness below. Below was not a natural cave. Below was a network of carved chambers, descending 3 levels into the rock, the deepest of them 35 feet underground. Work on the cisterns stopped. Archaeologist Themistocles Zamet was called in. What he found had been carved between roughly 3600 and 2500 BCE, before Stonehenge, before the Egyptian pyramids, before the earliest urban civilizations of Mesopotamia. On the island of Malta, a culture that has left almost no other trace in history carved an underground complex using stone tools. No metal, no iron. Stone and antler and bone, grinding through solid limestone, room by room, level by level, deeper. Inside the chambers, archaeologists found the remains of approximately 7,000 individuals, 7,000 people, placed here deliberately over more than 1,000 years. Some chambers contain red ochre spirals, still visible on the walls today. One chamber contains a carved recess with a corbelled ceiling and a specific interior geometry. That room is called the Oracle Chamber. Dr. Igor Reznikov, a specialist in acoustic archaeology, studied the Oracle Chamber in 1988. He found that the room resonates at approximately 110 Hz, the same fundamental frequency as the male speaking voice. The chamber doesn't just reflect sound, it amplifies it, cycles it back, distributes it simultaneously from every surface. A voice speaking inside appears to come from the walls, the ceiling, and the floor at once. Later acoustic research, including studies by researchers affiliated with MIT, found that the chamber's geometry cannot be coincidental. The angles, the depth, the corbelled ceiling, they produce a specific resonance that no natural cave would generate. Someone designed this room to sound the way it sounds. What 110 Hz resonance does to the human brain has been documented in neuroscience. At that frequency, sustained acoustic exposure affects the right temporal lobe in ways associated with altered states of consciousness, suppressed rational analysis, heightened emotional response, susceptibility to suggestion. Shamanic and ritual traditions across dozens of cultures have used specific sound frequencies to induce trance states. The Oracle Chamber does this automatically. You enter it, someone speaks, and your brain chemistry shifts in ways you don't consciously register. Mainstream archaeologists interpret the hypogeum as a communal burial site with possible ritual uses. The acoustics are impressive but may be an incidental product of the chamber's shape, not a deliberately engineered feature. The painted decorations suggest ceremonial activity. The site was likely used for ancestor veneration, common to Neolithic cultures across the Mediterranean. But this requires us to accept that the builders of the hypogeum accidentally produced a room resonating at precisely the frequency known to alter human consciousness, a room whose geometry, according to acoustic researchers, could not be the product of chance. If the Oracle Chamber's acoustics are deliberate, then whoever carved it 5,000 years ago understood something about the relationship between sound frequency and human consciousness that Western science didn't formally document until the 20th century. Nobody knows how they knew. There is one more object from the hypogeum that has no satisfying explanation. Found during excavations and now housed in Malta's National Museum of Archaeology, it is a small terracotta figurine known as the Sleeping Lady. She is corpulent, reclining, eyes closed, in an attitude of deep unconscious sleep. She is unique. No other object like her exists in all of Neolithic art worldwide. The pose is not death. It is specifically, unmistakably, sleep, or something deeper than sleep. Was she dreaming? Was she the person who used the oracle chamber? Was she the purpose of the oracle chamber? Nobody knows. The sleeping lady was found in the darkness of the hypogeum, in a room designed to make the walls speak, in a monument built by people who left almost nothing else behind. Visitors to the hypogeum today still describe feeling watched, still describe disorientation in chambers where the acoustics are wrong, where the light behaves strangely, where the sense of descending 35 feet underground among 7,000 deliberately placed dead produces something that no archaeological report fully captures. What was the oracle chamber actually used for? How did its builders understand acoustic physics that Western science documented 5,000 years later? Who is the sleeping lady? And what exactly were the people who built the hypogeum trying to do to the living who came there? Number 4. The tomb of Pakal, Palenque. In 1949, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruiz Luillier was examining the floor of the Temple of the Inscriptions at the Maya site of Palenque when he noticed something that didn't belong. Several large stone floor tiles had holes drilled in them, small, precise holes, with the stone plugs still sitting nearby. Holes in a floor tile have one purpose: their handles. For lifting, he lifted one. Below was rubble, packed tight, floor to ceiling, deliberately placed. Ruiz Luillier understood that he was looking at a sealed staircase. He began excavating. It took 4 years. The staircase descended 80 feet into the interior of the pyramid, filled end to end with stone and rubble fill, every foot of it cleared by hand. At intervals in the fill, the excavation team found human remains individuals placed in the rubble at specific points along the descent, as if stationed there. Guards for the passage, or offerings to whatever was waiting at the bottom. In 1952, after 4 years of work, Ruiz Luillier reached the burial chamber. The room had been sealed since approximately 683 CE. 1,269 years. The air inside, when the entrance was finally broken open, reportedly smelled of nothing at all. Not dust, not decay, just sealed, stale darkness that had been sitting there since before the Vikings reached North America, before the Norman conquest, before the Mongol Empire rose and fell. At the center of the burial chamber sat a sarcophagus covered by a stone lid weighing 5 tons heavier than 3 average automobiles, carved with elaborate imagery that has been debated ever since. In 1968, Erich von Däniken famously argued the figure on the lid depicted an ancient astronaut operating a spacecraft. The theory is dismissed by virtually every archaeologist who has studied it. The iconography, properly read in the context of Maya cosmology, depicts Pakal descending into the underworld on the world tree, a standard funerary image. What von Däniken saw as rocket engines are maze and serpent motifs. But there are things about the tomb that mainstream archaeology has never resolved as cleanly. The jade funeral mask found on Pakal's body was assembled on his face inside the sarcophagus. It is a mosaic of 340 pieces of jade with shell and obsidian eyes, and it was built in place because the complete mask cannot pass through the entrance to the burial chamber. The entrance is the only way in. The mask had to be constructed around the body, in the dark, in a sealed space, with the workers knowing they were about to close the door behind them. However, the last people out of that chamber left. They did it in total darkness, with a completed jade face staring up at the ceiling they were about to seal for over 1,000 years. And then there is the psychoduct. Running from the burial chamber, up the full length of the staircase, through every sealed section of rubble, all the way to the temple floor above, is a hollow stone tube, narrow, barely wide enough for a hand. But it runs 80 feet upward from the dead king's sarcophagus to the living world above. Archaeologists call it a psychoduct, a soul tube. The accepted interpretation is that it provided a passage for Pakal's spirit to communicate with the priests who continued to use the temple above his sealed tomb. Think about what that means. Whoever sealed this tomb, whoever filled that staircase with rubble and stationed human remains along the descent and assembled a jade mask in total darkness in a chamber they were about to close forever, also ran a stone tube from the dead man's coffin to the surface, because they expected him to have something to say. What were the priests in the temple above listening for? What did they expect to hear coming up through 80 feet of hollow stone from a sealed room where a dead man lay under 5 tons of carved rock? The staircase was sealed so completely that it remained invisible for more than 1,000 years. Temple visitors walked across the perforated floor tiles for generations without recognizing the handles beneath their feet. The rubble fill was placed so carefully that even with the handle holes present, no one looked. Nobody looked for 1,269 years. The tomb waited. The psychoduct waited. Whatever Pakal wanted preserved in that chamber, he succeeded. And whatever the soul tube was designed to transmit, it opened into a temple that continued operating for centuries after his death, used by priests who knew the tube was there, who knew there was a man at the other end of it, and who built their ceremonies around that knowledge. What were the priests listening for? Why could the jade mask only have been assembled inside the sealed chamber after the king was already inside? What were the human remains placed at intervals in the rubble staircase protecting or preventing from coming up? And who were the last people out of that burial chamber, and what did they hear when they sealed the door? Number 5. Vault B, Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple. In 2011, the Supreme Court of India ordered an inventory of the 6 secret vaults beneath the Sri Padmanabhaswamy Temple in Thiruvananthapuram, Kerala. The temple had been in continuous operation for at least 1,000 years, administered by the royal family of Travancore. Nobody outside the temple administration knew what was inside the vaults. The court-appointed committee opened 5 of them. What they found was difficult to comprehend. Vault A alone contained an 18-pound solid gold idol of Vishnu encrusted with precious stones, a gold chain measuring more than 18 feet long, necklaces embedded with diamonds the size of thumbnails, hundreds of thousands of gold coins, some so ancient they predated any identifiable Indian dynasty, gold elephants, ceremonial crowns. An estimated value, and this figure is contested, because some objects are simply beyond standard appraisal in excess of $22 billion. 5 vaults, 5 chambers of impossible wealth, accumulated over 1,000 years of offerings from successive rulers of one of the most powerful kingdoms in southern India. The 6th vault was Vault B. Vault B has 2 iron doors. The outer door is relatively recent. The inner door is older, significantly older, and bears the carved image of 2 cobras, a team assembled to open it. The outer door yielded without difficulty. The inner door did not. According to documentation reviewed by the court committee, an attempt was made in the 1930s to open the inner door of Vault B. The people who made the attempt did not complete it. Several of them died. The vault was resealed. No further attempt has been made since. The royal family of Travancore has consistently maintained that Vault B should not be opened. Their position is theological, not political. The door, they say, is sealed by a Naga bandam, a serpent seal, a form of ancient ritual protection embedded in Kerala's temple traditions. Opening a Naga bandam through physical force, rather than the correct ritual procedure, which involves a specific chant known only to priests of a particular lineage, invites consequences the family refuses to specify in secular legal proceedings. They say it cannot be opened. Not won't. Cannot. The Supreme Court of India has not ordered the door forced. Litigation has continued for more than a decade. As of the most recent court proceedings, the inner door remains sealed. No camera, no ground-penetrating instrument, no device of any kind has been permitted access to the space beyond. The court-appointed committee has seen only the outer door and the cobras carved on the inner one. Mainstream observers, legal commentators, historians, secular analysts interpret this straightforwardly. Vault B almost certainly contains more treasure, similar to the other 5 vaults. The Travancore family's reluctance is a combination of genuine religious belief and a practical calculation about maintaining custodianship over what may be one of the largest concentrations of ancient wealth on Earth. The 1930s deaths were coincidental, exaggerated, or are simply unverifiable. The Nagabandham is a religious tradition, not a physical mechanism. But the people most motivated to open Vault B are precisely the people refusing to do so. The Travancore royal family administers the temple. They are the custodians of its wealth. They have every reason, legal, financial, institutional, to know what is inside every vault they are responsible for. They have managed this institution for centuries. They know the size of what they're sitting on, and they are afraid to open one door inside it. The $22 billion found in 5 vaults establishes exactly what the Padmanabhaswamy temple holds. We know what kind of institution this is. The Travancore family knows it better than anyone alive. And despite knowing all of that, despite knowing that what is behind that door is almost certainly more of what was behind the other 5, they say the door cannot be opened. Not safely. Not without a ritual requiring knowledge held by priests of a specific lineage, the last of whom may or may not still be living. What does a family that has managed a $22 billion treasure vault for 1,000 years consider dangerous enough to leave sealed? There is something specific they believe. Not a vague superstition. The Travancore family are educated, legally sophisticated people who have navigated the Indian court system for over a decade on exactly this question. They have a specific belief about what is behind that door and what opening it without the correct procedure will cause. They have maintained that position under sustained legal pressure, at significant cost, for years. Nobody has moved them. What is the Nagabandham actually protecting? What happened to the people who attempted to force the inner door in the 1930s? Is there a priest alive today who carries the chant that would make it safe to open? And if that lineage has been broken, if the knowledge needed to safely open Vault B no longer exists anywhere in the world, what happens to whatever is waiting inside it? Number 6. The unfinished passage of Seti I. When Giovanni Belzoni entered the tomb of Seti I on October 16, 1817, he wept. He was not a sentimental man. An Italian strongman turned explorer, who had spent years forcing his way into Egyptian monuments, Belzoni had seen what the ancient world could produce. But standing in KV-17, the tomb he had just opened in the Valley of the Kings, he understood he was somewhere different. The walls of Seti I's tomb cover every available surface with painted relief. Scenes from the Book of Gates, the Book of What is in the Underworld, the Book of the Dead executed in full color, with detail so fine that some individual hieroglyphs contain internal decoration visible only under magnification. The tomb descends 440 feet into the limestone bedrock of the valley, through 17 identified chambers and side corridors. At the time of discovery, it was the longest, deepest, most elaborately decorated royal tomb ever found in Egypt. The most beautiful room in the most beautiful tomb. And Belzoni wept. Then he noticed the passage at the bottom. Beyond the burial chamber, past the lower halls where Seti's astronomical ceiling depicted the night sky in precise arrangement, there is a passage. It begins as finished corridor, the same careful limestone cutting, the same deliberate work as everything above it. Then, partway down, it changes. The walls become rough, the floor becomes uneven, the decoration stops, the passage continues descending in a different style, cruder and faster, and then it ends in rubble. Egyptologists call it the unfinished passage. The standard explanation is practical. Seti I died before construction was complete. The workers were cutting downward toward a planned lower hall when the pharaoh died. The project was abandoned, and the upper sections were sealed. What the lower hall was going to contain is unknown. Nobody knows. The passage was simply left. But the unfinished passage descends past the burial chamber, past the room where Seti's sarcophagus waited for more than 3,000 years, past the astronomical ceiling, past everything that was clearly the functional endpoint of the tomb, the place where the king would rest. The passage continues downward after the burial is complete, heading toward something else. Something planned. Something that never got built, or that was built and then filled deliberately with rubble. In 2017 and 2018, the Scan Pyramids project, the same team that used muon tomography to detect previously unknown voids inside the Great Pyramid of Giza, turned their instruments toward the Valley of the Kings. Their surveys around KV-17 detected anomalies. Subsurface features inconsistent with solid bedrock in areas adjacent to and below the unfinished passage. The anomalies have not been excavated. They have not been definitively identified. They may be natural voids in the limestone. They may be something else. The tomb robbers who stripped KV-17 in antiquity stripped it so thoroughly that Seti's mummy was later moved by priests to a hiding cache to protect it from further desecration, appear to have concentrated on the decorated chambers. The elaborate lower sections, the area around the unfinished passage, show less evidence of ancient disturbance. Either the robbers didn't go that deep, or they did go and found nothing worth taking, or something about the lower sections made them stop before they reached the bottom. Seti I was one of the most powerful pharaohs of the 19th dynasty. His reign, from approximately 1294 to 1279 BCE, saw military campaigns into Libya and Syria, extensive temple construction at Abydos, and renovation of monuments throughout Egypt. He did not die suddenly. His reign lasted more than a decade, long enough to complete a project of this complexity, unless something changed, or unless the unfinished passage was not unfinished in the way we usually mean the word, not abandoned due to death, but intentionally left rough. A deliberate signal. A finished corridor in ancient Egypt announces itself. It says, "Here is something valued, completed, intended for you." An unfinished corridor says something different. The workers stopped here, nothing beyond this point. No ancient text describes what lies at the bottom. No inscription in the decorated chambers above makes reference to a lower section. The astronomical ceiling in the burial hall, the most complete ancient star map found in Egypt, ends at the chamber walls. Whatever it was charting, the lower passage was not part of the intended diagram. Or it was. And that section has never been found. 200 years after Belzoni wept his way through the most beautiful tomb in the Valley of the Kings, the bottom of KV-17 remains unexplained. The unfinished passage still descends into rubble. The Scan Pyramid's anomalies remain unexcavated. The ancient robbers who stripped every painted wall apparently stopped somewhere on the way down. What was the unfinished passage designed to reach? What are the subsurface anomalies that ground-penetrating radar detected below KV-17? Why did ancient tomb robbers who systematically stripped every decorated chamber apparently not follow the passage all the way down? And what, exactly, was Seti I's tomb pointing at in the rock beneath the Valley of the Kings? Number 7. The Nested Pyramids of Chichen Itza. El Castillo is the pyramid everyone photographs at Chichen Itza. It rises 98 feet above the Yucatan Plain, a stepped limestone structure with staircases on 4 sides and a temple at the top. Every spring equinox, the angle of the setting sun casts a shadow along the north staircase that creates the illusion of a serpent descending toward the ground. Thousands of tourists arrive specifically for that moment. They photograph the pyramid. They watch the serpent appear and dissolve. Most of them have no idea what's inside the pyramid they're standing in front of. In 1931, archaeologists from the Carnegie Institution of Washington began tunneling into El Castillo. Inside, they found a second, older pyramid. Smaller, darker, completely encased by the outer structure. At its summit was a chamber containing a red jaguar throne, inlaid with jade discs, and a carved circular stone. The outer pyramid had been built directly over the inner one. Not beside it, not around it, at a distance over it, precisely, encasing it so completely that from the outside there was no indication anything existed within. The inner pyramid had itself been used for ceremonies for centuries before the outer structure was built on top of it. That was 1931. In 2016, researchers from the National Autonomous University of Mexico used three-dimensional electrical resistivity tomography, a technique that maps subsurface density to create detailed underground images, and found a third structure inside the second, a third pyramid, older still, sealed inside the chamber already sealed inside El Castillo. 3 nested pyramids, each one encasing the last, each one darker and older and less understood. Open the pyramid. There's another pyramid. Open that one. There's another pyramid. Each one older. Each one darker. Each one containing things that nobody fully understands. In 2015, researchers from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History conducted a ground-penetrating radar survey of the ground beneath El Castillo's north staircase. They found a large natural cenote, limestone sinkhole filled with water, the kind found throughout the Yucatan Peninsula. The cenote sits directly beneath the center of the pyramid, not beside it, not adjacent to a corner, directly beneath the main structure, at the center. The pyramid was built precisely on top of it. The Maya considered cenotes to be entrances to Xibalba, the underworld, the realm of the dead. They are found throughout Maya religious practice as sites for ritual deposition, objects, animals, and human beings placed in the water as offerings to the gods below. The cenote beneath El Castillo has been partially surveyed using underwater cameras. It contains human remains, children, and adults, along with jade, gold, and ceramic objects accumulated over centuries. A pit of bones and offerings, directly beneath the foundation. The builders of El Castillo did not find a convenient flat location that happened to be above a cenote. The cenote was there first. The pyramid was built to be precisely over it. The entrance to the underworld was the foundation. Everything above was built to stand on top of that. Mainstream archaeologists interpret the nested pyramids as successive dynastic rebuilding, a practice common across Mesoamerican cultures, where each new ruling period built over the previous structure, preserving and containing the old one within the new. The cenote beneath El Castillo was a sacred site predating the pyramid, and building above it was a deliberate act of cosmic alignment, the living temple connected directly to the realm of the dead below. The ritual chambers inside the substructure show evidence of bloodletting ceremonies and elite religious practice. But the nesting raises a question that succession alone doesn't resolve. When the builders of the outer El Castillo encased the substructure within it, they sealed the inner pyramid so completely that its existence was unknown for nearly 1,000 years. Whatever ceremonies had taken place in the Jaguar chamber was not incorporated into the new pyramid. It was entombed inside it, and when researchers found the third pyramid inside the second, the same question recurred. Did the builders of each successive layer know what they were sealing inside? Did they know about the Jaguar throne in the dark? The equinox serpent shadow on El Castillo's north staircase is not an accident. It required precise calculation of the sun's angle relative to the staircase geometry, sophisticated astronomical knowledge applied to stone. These were not people who built without intention. If they chose to encase earlier structures rather than demolish them, the choice was deliberate. If they chose to build over a cenote of bones, the choice was deliberate. The innermost chamber, with its jade jaguar throne, sits in the dark at the absolute center of a structure that has accumulated centuries of deliberate decisions around it, inside, and inside that, and inside that, the cenote below, the sacrificial deposits, the three nested pyramids. A building constructed as a statement about death, built on top of an entrance to the realm of the dead, with its own dead sealed within it. What ceremonies took place in the innermost chamber before it was sealed forever inside two more pyramids? Why did successive builders choose to encase rather than clear the earlier structures, and what did they believe was still alive in them? Was the cenote the reason for the entire site? And what does it mean that a pyramid visited by millions of tourists every year was built as a monument over a pit of offered bones? Number 8. The frozen rooms of Herculaneum. At approximately 1 p.m. on August 24, 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted. Pompeii, 5 miles to the southeast, received a rain of ash and pumice that accumulated over hours. People had time to make decisions, gather belongings, help children, attempt escape. The 2,000 who did not get out were buried slowly, preserved in position by ash that hardened around their bodies over years. Herculaneum received something different. At some point during the night, estimates cluster around midnight to 1 a.m., a pyroclastic surge hit the city, not ash. Superheated gas and volcanic material traveling at roughly 100 miles per hour at approximately 700 degrees Fahrenheit. The people of Herculaneum did not suffocate. They did not have time to suffocate. Thermal shock arrived in seconds. In the boat sheds along the ancient shoreline, discovered in 1981, archaeologists found more than 300 skeletons compressed together against the walls, bones still arranged in the position of people crouching to shelter themselves. They had run to the water to escape by boat. There were no boats, and then there was nothing. The city was buried under approximately 75 feet of volcanic material that hardened into something resembling concrete, a layer roughly as thick as a 7-story building. For 16 centuries, Herculaneum simply did not exist at the surface. It sat sealed in the dark with everything inside it: the furniture, the food on tables, the wine in amphorae, the paintings on walls, the scrolls in libraries, preserved by the complete absence of air and moisture and time. Excavations began in 1738 under orders from King Charles III of Naples, initially through tunnels bored directly into the hardened volcanic material. Systematic archaeological work began in the 20th century. Today, approximately a quarter of ancient Herculaneum has been uncovered. The rest remains underground, specifically beneath the modern Italian city of Ercolano, which was built directly on top of the site. Full excavation would require demolishing a living city of 50,000 people. Among what has been found is the Villa of the Papyri, a large private residence partially excavated through 18th century tunnels. Inside were 1,800 carbonized scrolls, actual papyrus, actual ink, actual text, preserved in a state of complete carbonization, compressed, blackened, fragile. The scrolls are largely works of the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus, but the villa has not been fully excavated. Researchers estimate hundreds of additional scrolls remain in sections that have never been reached. The Villa of the Papyri is the only intact library from classical antiquity. Every other ancient collection, Alexandria, Pergamon, the great libraries of Rome, was destroyed, scattered, or lost. Herculaneum's library survived because a volcano buried it before anyone could damage it. What the unexcavated sections contain is genuinely unknown. Some researchers believe the library may include lost scientific treatises of Aristotle, known to the ancient world but only partially preserved in medieval copies. Others point to the possibility of lost plays of Euripides, unknown histories, philosophical texts that could meaningfully alter our understanding of ancient thought. In 2023, the Vesuvius Challenge, a competition with significant prize money, successfully decoded text from a previously unread Herculaneum scroll using multispectral imaging and machine learning algorithms capable of reading carbonized papyrus without unrolling it. The technology works. It has been demonstrated on actual Herculaneum material. We now have the means to read scrolls sealed underground since 79 CE without destroying them. But most of the library is still underground. The scrolls decay further every year, compressed beneath 75 feet of hardened volcanic material in a location inaccessible without demolishing a modern city. Every year we wait. Whatever is written on those scrolls becomes marginally less recoverable. We know the technology now exists. We know what may be down there, and 50,000 people are living on top of it. The rooms of Herculaneum that have been excavated are strange to move through, not because of what was hidden by human intention, but because nothing was hidden. The rooms were simply stopped, mid-moment. Mid-life, a table with a carbonized loaf of bread still on it, a wall painting with colors still bright after 2,000 years, a wooden bed with the impression of a mattress still pressed into it. These are rooms where time ended on a specific night in 79 CE and has not resumed. The skeletons in the boat sheds never received burial. They are still in the positions they held in the final seconds before the surge arrived, crouching against walls, waiting for boats that never came. 2,000 years later, unchanged, exactly where the mountain left them. What do the unexcavated sections of the Villa of the Papyri contain? Which lost works of antiquity might still be readable underground, beneath a modern Italian city? How much of what we believe about ancient philosophy, science, and history would change if we could reach those scrolls? And is there a version of this story where we actually get to know before it's too late? Number 9. The Hidden Caves of Qumran. In the spring of 1947, a Bedouin shepherd named Mohammed Ed-Dib was searching for a stray goat in the limestone cliffs above the Dead Sea in the Judean desert. He threw a stone into a cave opening to drive the animal out. He heard the sound of breaking pottery. He went inside. He found large clay jars, sealed and intact, arranged carefully in the dark. Inside the jars were leather scrolls, wrapped in linen, left there by people who had sealed this place and walked away. He had found, by throwing a stone at a goat, the most significant archaeological discovery of the 20th century. The scrolls were ancient Hebrew manuscripts. Over the following decade, archaeologists and Bedouin treasure hunters, working in competition, sometimes in open conflict, discovered 10 more caves in the limestone cliffs above the Qumran Plateau. The total material, more than 900 documents, from nearly complete manuscripts to fragments smaller than a fingertip. Among them were texts representing every book of the Hebrew Bible except the Book of Esther, plus dozens of texts previously unknown to any scholar alive. The oldest manuscripts date to the 3rd century BCE, more than 1,000 years older than any previously known copy of the same texts. The Dead Sea Scrolls remain the oldest known biblical manuscripts in existence. The community that hid them was almost certainly the Essenes, a Jewish sect that had withdrawn from Jerusalem and established a settlement at Qumran by at least the 2nd century BCE. They considered the Jerusalem priesthood corrupt, the temple defiled, and the religious establishment of their time irrevocably fallen. They withdrew into the desert. They studied, copied, and produced manuscripts. They built a settlement with a scriptorium, a dedicated room for producing texts, along with communal halls, a water system, and access to the cliff caves above. Around 68 CE, Roman forces advancing through Judea reached the vicinity of Qumran. The community gathered their library, every scroll accumulated over generations, sealed them in clay jars, and concealed them in the cliff caves above the settlement. Then they were gone, killed, dispersed, absorbed into the chaos of the Jewish-Roman War. The historical record doesn't say. The scrolls waited in the dark for 1,879 years, until a stone broke a jar and a shepherd noticed. Cave 4 is the most important of the 11. It yielded the largest concentration of material fragments of hundreds of individual documents, and it is the only cave that was not natural. It was carved, cut directly into the limestone cliff, shaped deliberately to hold jars, prepared as a hiding place. Someone made this cave. It didn't exist before the Essenes needed it. The theological implications of the scrolls have not been fully resolved by mainstream scholarship or by the religious traditions most directly affected. The documents include texts excluded from both the Jewish and Christian canons, the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Enoch, the War Scroll, the Temple Scroll texts that carried authority at Qumran but were edited out of official scripture in the centuries that followed. They reveal a Jewish religious world far more diverse, far more contested, and far more textually varied than the settled traditions of either faith acknowledge. The question of what early Judaism and early Christianity actually were is substantially complicated by these texts. The Dead Sea Scrolls were not immediately made available to the scholarly world. An editorial committee appointed in the 1950s controlled access to the unpublished material for more than 4 decades. Other researchers were denied permission to study the originals or even detailed photographs. The monopoly lasted until 1991, when unauthorized photographs were published and the material was finally made accessible. The committee's explanation: the sheer complexity of translation work. Critics argued, and some still argue, that texts complicating official theological narratives were deliberately held back. Nobody has ever fully resolved that argument. Not all of the scrolls were recovered. In 2017, a Hebrew University team investigating what became known as Cave 12, identified by survey work in the cliffs, found the cave intact and clearly once used for scroll storage. They found broken clay jars. They found linen wrapping material. They did not find scrolls. The scrolls had been there once. They were no longer there. Whether removed in antiquity, taken by 20th century looters, or destroyed in 2 millennia of sitting in the dark, no one can say. Cave 12 held what may have been the last undisturbed cache from Qumran. It was empty. What the Essenes considered worth dying to preserve was their entire intellectual world, sealed into clay jars in a limestone cliff they believed would outlast whatever was coming. They were right. The jars outlasted Rome by 2,000 years. What are the texts in the still unpublished or partially translated fragments? What were the Cave 12 scrolls and where are they now? How would the recorded history of Judaism and Christianity change if the complete Qumran library had survived intact? And what exactly did the Essenes believe was important enough to seal into the rock of a desert cliff and leave there in silence for 2,000 years? Number 10. The Buried Monument of Petra. Petra is one of the most photographed ancient sites on Earth. The treasury, the rose-red facade carved directly into a Jordanian sandstone cliff, is the image everyone carries. Millions of tourists have walked the narrow canyon called the Sick, turned a corner, and looked up at it. Historians, archaeologists, and explorers have studied Petra intensively for nearly 2 centuries. since Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt disguised himself as a pilgrim and became the first modern Westerner to enter it in 1812. In 2016, researchers Sarah Parcak and Christopher Tuttle published findings in the Bulletin of the American Schools of Oriental Research. Using high-resolution commercial satellite imagery combined with drone photography and ground survey, they had identified a large monumental structure buried beneath the surface in Petra's southern sector, hidden in plain sight, beneath a place studied continuously for 200 years. The structure measures approximately 184 feet long by 161 feet wide, roughly the footprint of an Olympic swimming pool. It sits beneath only 1 to 3 feet of sediment. It features a large platform with what appear to be column bases visible in the satellite imagery, and a smaller raised platform on top, oriented toward true north. The construction style is consistent with Nabatean architecture built by the same people who carved the treasury, who engineered the water system that sustained a desert city of 20,000 people, who left their mark on every stone surface at Petra, and there is no record of it anywhere. No inscription in any language, no reference in any Greek or Roman account of Petra, no note in any text from any civilization. A structure the size of an Olympic swimming pool, buried under a foot of dirt, in one of the most continuously studied archaeological sites in the world, and nobody knew it was there. Nobody. The Nabateans built Petra over several centuries, from roughly the 4th century BCE through the 1st century CE. They were desert traders, skilled beyond almost any other ancient culture at managing water in an arid landscape, at carving directly into rock, at building facades that announced wealth and power without revealing what was inside them. Their religion worshipped deities represented in purely abstract form, stone blocks, pillar-shaped idols with no human face, no carved features. Their rituals are partially understood through objects found at the site and through accounts by Greek and Roman observers who encountered them but never fully understood what they were seeing. The Nabateans were absorbed into the Roman Empire in 106 CE. Within a century or two of annexation, the distinctive Nabatean culture had dissolved. Petra was gradually abandoned over the early medieval period, forgotten by the outside world, until Burckhardt found it in 1812 empty, its red cliffs silent, the wind moving through carved facades no living person had seen in generations. The inner sanctum of Petra's most important surviving temple, the Qasr al-Bint, contains subfloor chambers that have never been excavated. The temple walls still stand among the tallest ancient structures remaining at the site, roofless now, open to the sky, but the floor intact, the sealed spaces beneath it unknown in their extent and their contents. A Nabatean religious complex of this importance, with sealed chambers beneath its most sacred space, in a culture whose religious practices remain only partially understood. Mainstream archaeologists interpret the newly discovered buried platform as a large public monument or processional staging area, a space for ceremonies approaching the main temple complex. The absence of any surviving record is attributed to the near-total loss of Nabatean literary sources. Their textual culture did not survive their absorption into Rome. The subfloor chambers at the Qasr al-Bint are simply unexcavated, waiting for resources and the right conditions. But the Nabateans decorated everything. Every tomb facade, every water channel, every carved surface at Petra shows evidence of intentional design. Where inscriptions were appropriate, they left inscriptions. They were not a people who built monumental public structures and left no trace of what those structures meant. Whatever the buried platform was, it was significant enough to construct at enormous scale, and then significant enough to leave without a single word of explanation, in a city whose builders explained nearly everything else. 10 rooms, 10 sealed spaces. Hidden by choice, by catastrophe, by time. A man in Turkey knocked through a wall and fell into an 18-story city. A robot in Mexico found silver pools in a chamber, sealed for 1,800 years. A construction worker in Malta broke through a ceiling and found 7,000 dead people and a room that speaks back. A Mexican archaeologist spent 4 years clearing rubble to reach a king who had left a stone tube open to the surface in case he had something to say after death. An Indian royal family stands in front of a cobra-marked door and says, simply, "It cannot be opened." An Egyptian tomb descends into a passage pointing at something in the rock no one has reached. A Mayan pyramid sits on top of a pit of bones at the entrance to the underworld. A Roman city froze mid-morning and has been waiting since. A desert community sealed their entire intellectual world into clay jars and left them in a cliff for 1,879 years. And beneath the most photographed ancient city in the world, buried under a foot of dirt, a structure the size of a swimming pool sat invisible for 2 centuries. Every civilization in this video hid something, every one of them, by choice, by catastrophe, by deliberate design. The wall between the ordinary world and the ancient one is sometimes very thin, and sometimes all it takes is a renovation, a rainstorm, a shepherd throwing a stone. The question was never what they hid, the question is what's still there. If you want to know what else has been buried and forgotten, subscribe, there are more rooms like these. If you made it this far, drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. And if someone you know needs to see this, share it with them.